We are already in the moment when Chinese producers have a huge advantage, and we see it already on the data when they massively start exporting these electric cars abroad. They are much cheaper because they have these networks of suppliers. The European producers assume that producing small electric car in China is 10,000 euro cheaper in China than EU. So it makes huge difference, especially that you have to in one moment sell such and such amount or percentage of your cars should be electric.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Furnival. You are watching or listening to an OSW interview. Today I'll be talking to Dr. Konrad Popławski, the coordinator of OSW's Connectivity and Regional Integration project. We'll be discussing electromobility and the impact this is having on different global regions, including Central Europe. So today we're going to discuss the global impact of electromobility. But before we begin, how about we define electromobility? What are we talking about?
So basically we are talking about electric cars. So the main global issue right now is how to get there, how to change our industry, our economy, how to change global supply chains, how to change to some extent politics of automobile industry, because automobile industry is one of the most internationalized in the world, and therefore changes in this model they will have very, very huge global impact on the whole structure of economy and economic relations. So basically it's about that.
Okay. From what I can see, there are three main centres at the moment. So it is, of course, something that affects the whole world. But it seems to be the United States of America, China, and the European Union. So from these three, is there a clear leader or a clear loser?
I would say those are three global players. And what is new in this concert of these players is that right now we don't have this typical scheme when Western companies are leaders. They are building up some innovation and disseminating it in the world. But the progress, the innovations are coming mostly from Asia and from the United States. And Europe has great problems to adapt to it because it's a little bit a latecomer. Because electromobility consists of two most important components, which actually Europe is not the best in. The first thing is you need digitalization, because you have much electronics there, a lot of technologies. These new cars should be iPhones on wheels to some extent. So you need very good software, and we know that the US is very strong in this aspect. And you need batteries and electronic industry. And already 3-4 decades ago, Europe mostly shifted this industry to China and East Asia. So actually, such countries as Japan, South Korea, and especially China are very, very, very strong in this aspect. And Europe has, for now, no core competence. It's rather, it still have very good brands which are coming from this age of combustion engine, but when it comes to some core competence, so some very good way how to build, for example, electric cars or some software, we are rather not so strong, and this is highly problematic because cars and manufacturing of it's one of the strengths of Europe. For years, it was one of the strongest industries here.
Mm-hmm.
When you analyze the trade data, just chemical industry, it generates about 185 billion euro of trade surplus for the European Union. And just second is the automobile industry with over 100 billion euro of trade surplus.
Mm-hmm.
If we cannot challenge our weaknesses, we could very fast lose second of our strongest industries, which very important consequences for whole the European Union and its regions.
Okay. So one of the reasons that we've in Europe have been bad at the transition is, as you pointed out, the technological aspects. But is it possible that simply we had such strong brands in Europe that we didn't feel the need to change?
To some extent, it was so. Europe is somehow victim of its success, because the brands here, especially German ones, but also French or Italian, everybody knows those brands, so I don't have to mention them. They were very strong. In the recent years, they even seem to be stronger than their American counterparts or competitors. The Chinese seem to be not at that level. It was perceived as interesting cars, but of very cheap quality and nothing very substantial. And we thought that this combustion engine paradise will last. So when Tesla came with these electric cars, many bosses of the European automobile industry treated this as a very interesting and original idea, but without much consequence, because combustion engine will be for forever. But it turns out that was not true. Apart from it, the industry was not very fair always, because we had this diesel scandal. There were even some falsifications, open source falsifications, that the diesel engine is already so good that we could get rid of these pollutants or emissions, which are.
When the story broke, it was Volkswagen, of course, but it turned out basically all manufacturers were cheating the same way.
It was probably a standard in the automobile industry. Volkswagen lost the most of its reputation, but probably it was much more. But because German car makers made the most of diesels, so for them it affected them the most. And then this Tesla came, Chinese, which saw that actually they could never be a real competition for the European brands. They thought they have nothing to lose, and they just entered electromobility markets, putting a lot of money on this and funds on this development. And it was the moment when Europe started losing, because it turned out that electromobility is a pillar. It's no any bridge technology. It's just the future of the electromobility, and we see it already on our streets. So coming back to your question, even if these brands survive, Audi, BMW, BMW, let's say in 10 years, it's probable that we'll still have these brands on our streets, but all the technology inside will be of Chinese, of American origin, which is a very bad message for a whole network of suppliers here in Europe.
Okay, but before we move on to that very important issue about how important it is for Europe, I would like to dig a little deeper into the causes first, because the way I see it, in Europe we subsidized electric cars because it was a dream for a green future, and it really didn't matter where those green cars come from. As long as they're clean, they can be from China, they can be from the US. Did the US and China have the same policy? Did they subsidize purchases of electric cars from outside of their markets?
Yeah, that's a very good remark. Actually, Europe looked at these matters not from the industrial policy angle, but we were a little bit maybe visionary, but also idealistic about how the global economy could be structured, and we didn't see that where our interests are. So, as you said, that's true. That in Europe the cars were subsidized wherever they are from. Many cars produced in China get such subsidies. It was also in interest of European brands because they have also factories in China or US, so they get these subsidies. But the problem
On the
is
Chinese market.
on the Chinese. They got subsidies for cars produced from in China and exported to Europe.
Oh, okay.
And so not only they produce it cheaply, but they got also subsidies. So it was in their interest, but it was not in the interest of the Europeans as a whole, because we started to shift our technology competences to China. Because even if you get some margins for such activities, the economies of scale started to be built up in China. They developed the network of suppliers, and then you wake up in the world when they have whole competences and you can produce just there. It's not choice, it's just necessity, because they have best competences. And the Chinese and later on Americans went reversed way. In China from the beginning they very strongly favored their domestic producers and domestication of production of foreign corporations. Before they have such not so efficient instruments, so they forced Western companies to open subsidiaries, joint ventures, where most of the shares belonged to the Chinese companies. But it didn't work very well, because the global players knew how to play this game, and they just produced in such modes very simple models. But even that led Chinese just to get some basic knowledge how to produce cars. And then they started to introduce many subsidies for these electric models. They very, very aggressively, and just on the model which are produced in China. And they could even...
So standard protectionism.
Standard protectionism, even to some extent not, because foreign producers could also get such subsidies.
But if they,
of course, if they produce in China, yeah. So it's a little bit double standard. But it was also interesting case with Koreans, because at that moment Koreans were very strong in producing batteries for such cars. So when Chinese noticed it, they just cut off subsidies for Korean batteries producers, and then they lose market share in China very quickly. And Americans actually this shift in the US towards in this direction was slower, probably because of these free markets beliefs and so on. But the US security guys noticed that the US won't win such unfair competition when the Chinese producers can get any subsidies they want, because this division between private and public in China is very unclear, because Chinese state is quite important player. And last year in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act was introduced. It sounds pretty like fighting inflation, but it was much more about industrial policy and subsidizing at the quite large scale development of electric cars and batteries on the US market. And actually, when you looked very carefully at the calculation how subsidies are paid out to the companies, so actually the level is very similar to the Chinese one. So the price of production some components in US is equal to China. So it's very visible that it's an instrument very tailor suited to compete with China. And actually it's not the first, because before we had CHIP Act, so subsidizing chip production in the US. and we see that US is going this direction, and they won't withdraw from it. It's already a political choice. Either Trump or Biden, nobody wants to stop such activities, and industrial policy is back on the agenda, and this hard industrial policy with subsidies and so on. And the EU is the only market where such solutions are not introduced yet, which seems pretty naive, but because the EU would like that the world is idealistic and everybody respects market competition and so on, but it's not so anymore. If China hasn't subscribed for it already for years, and the US is joining this company.
And now China is a very big player. It can't simply be walked over.
Yeah, and we see that this Chinese mode brings benefits because China dominated many important sectors already before electromobility, like photovoltaic production. Actually, Europe has assumed that it will be European industry. Also electronic industry, machine building, and right now they are trying to get their foot on the electromobility, and they are very close to be a very strong market leader.
Okay. Before we transition to discussing this region, I wanted to ask one more technical issue. So I read in your text, which you wrote for OSW, which we will provide the link for, that 7 out of 10 electric vehicles are sold to China worldwide at the moment. So this is, they have a large population, but it's quite surprising that their market is so well developed. How does the Chinese infrastructure look like? I'm talking about charging stations, mainly charging stations. Is there a network there which is superior to Europe's and America's?
I don't have very precise information when it comes to some numbers, but first of all, I would say that they have very big cities, huge cities like Beijing or Shanghai. And I think many people, when it comes to population, they just needed to commute in the city, because China is quite big as a country, and I believe they prefer to use, for example, high-speed train network when it comes to, because sometimes, let's say, your parents are 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers from your city. I tried once this railway network, and it's very huge, and these distances inside China are very huge. So
it's another thing that
I don't believe they even the best infrastructure for charging these cars would make them very beneficial. For example, to go 1,000 kilometers from somewhere, or 2,000, because you still need some time for charging. So I believe they use it for every time basis. Probably they liked it that electricity prices are probably lower than for other petroleum or other fuels. And another thing is that they made huge subsidies to achieve this success. So the state has quite strong discretionary power in China, and if they said we are following this path, it just happens.
Which is not the case.
And I would say it's also the Chinese are very good at, they like innovations a lot. They are not conservative when it comes to such things. Already when I was, it could be 8 years ago, they used a lot of, for example, of payments, virtual payments in all the shops, or even in trading places. And I was quite shocked, because some very traditional grocery shop expected you to pay just in by virtual payments because they didn't accept cash. They liked in
Germany certainly is very far behind.
very far behind. Also, sometimes the object of laughter from Chinese when they come because it's something else than they expect in Europe to see in Europe, and these cars offer something very pleasant for such Chinese because. Especially for youth, because of this, as I said before, iPhone on wheels, which is very good, very well integrated with your phone, with all your apps, with all your social media. It's a very different experience than just even BMW, which actually cannot connect to your phone. And right now we are at the situation that when the European producers have to access on the Chinese market to learn from it because they built already economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
They actually know the most about how consumers and what consumer likes in this market the most. So if you have already such
and with 7 out of 10 users, they are the consumers.
Yeah, it's huge amount of data to process and to think over how to design the next models. We are already in the moment when Chinese producers have a huge advantage, and we see it already on the data when they massively start exporting these electric cars abroad. They have huge problems with exporting their combustion engine models. They mostly were sold in China or sold to some lower income countries. But these electric cars, it seems that they are very competitive and they are much cheaper because they have these networks of suppliers. The European producers assume that producing small electric car in China is 10,000 euro cheaper in China than EU. So
makes a difference.
So it makes huge difference, especially as you want to make this product very popular because of the climate issues and so on. And you have very strict obligations, for example, from the EU, that you have to, in one moment, sell such and such amount or percentage of your cars should be electric.
Okay, so it's probably now time to turn to regional issues. The figure I want to start off with is I believe there are 850,000 jobs in Central Europe in the automobile industry. So there is a lot to lose for this region. How are we in Central Europe defending ourselves against the Chinese and American competition?
Okay, so maybe let's start from the beginning. How actually happened that the automobile industry is so strong in this part of Europe? We coped already for years with this problem of asymmetric relations with China. So the EU opened its markets very vastly for Chinese producers. And in China, we had a lot of informal barriers, and you had to fulfill different obligations to get access there. So it was not a market for Central European, mostly small and medium companies, but Chinese competitors were very strong here. And I believe some sectors cannot be developed here in Central Europe, although we had quite huge also cost advantage compared to the Western Europe because of this Chinese competition, because they were even cheaper and subsidized, basically. But car industry, it was a little bit different because it's still a complex industry. As we said before, it's not that Chinese could easily learn all the technologies how to build the car. We in Central Europe have very skillful human capital here. People, very good workers with long industrial traditions. They work in industry already for generations. So we have this tradition.
In the automobile industry.
In the automobile industry, but also generally in industry because it's important. I know it's from German industrial service that they are very happy that here is long tradition of industry. It's not like, let's say, in Africa or something where people 4 years, for example, they were trading and having not such ethics of working for factories, because it's something very different. And automobile industry developed here very well. We have a lot of factories, a lot of vast network of suppliers, and we actually are one of the key production hubs for the European markets. Of course, some parts are imported. The cheapest are imported from China, but still they are combined here, and we build more elaborate, sophisticated parts, mostly under German or French or Italian brands. So we're not very happy because it's not that we get very huge margins of it, but it's still have a lot of jobs with very decent salaries for skillful workers, and you can learn also a very how to produce very competitive product, one of the best European products. Right now, situation changes because we have radical change. We see already, as we discussed before, that Europe is not strong in it. So batteries are coming from Asia. So about 50% or 35 to 50% of value added of cars are coming from Asia, because such batteries like a little bit like engine and gears in combustion engine. It's a huge part of the value of the car. And digital things are coming from the US. We have to the market leaders are Tesla, but also BYD from China is very strong. And this changes a lot because, as we said before, maybe for German brands it doesn't make much sense, much difference if they produce their components in China or in Central Europe. But for us, the difference is huge.
For close to 1 million people, the difference is enormous.
And this makes very interesting change, because before this economic interest between Germany and Central Europe in automobile industry were very common. There were no divisions actually, because together we built up a very competitive products which brought a lot of GDP to this region, to Germany too. And right now, when German producers have problems with competitiveness, they engage in China more and more. It could be that they will have not so much work for their Central European subsidiaries, and this is highly problematic. This could be problematic for Poland, but especially for Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, which economies are very, very highly dependent on automobile industry, and this actually requests for some activities, but
which should be undertaken at the EU level,
of course. But the problem is that industrial policy and trade policies in the competences of the European Union, where Germany has quite strong say. And then we have this vicious circle. So Germany, which is dependent on China, cannot make too harsh decisions in Europe, because not to get some problems with their largest trade partner. And on the other hand, its automobile industry is getting weaker and weaker. And for us, it could be it could has a very ruining effect, because we are quite challenged by these changes.
Well, you're painting a very bleak picture. It sounds like there is almost no hope. We're in a death spiral. Is there anything that Central Europe can do to either keep this industry going or to replace it?
First of all, the situation changed, and the EU policy shouldn't be influenced so much by just the largest brands.
Mm-hmm.
Because similar problems as Central Europe could experience would be also the fate of German SMEs, which are also important suppliers, because it's not, we have there a lot of family companies which, let's say, they could produce for ages some very small, tiny part of, let's say, of engine. they won't easily adapt to
The
produce
combustion engine.
parts of ion batteries because it's not their identity. And we could have such problems generally in EU. So I would say that we need to coordinate this problem more in Central Europe and build some lobbying power to influence the European Commission and to become more assertive when it comes in trade policy, because this old trade policy worked fine when the Western companies had capital and knowledge advantage over Chinese, but it doesn't stand anymore. So
China is definitely a threat.
So this we cannot allow ourselves anymore to conduct this asymmetric trade policy.
So you would say the European Union needs to behave like China and the United States.
If the rules of play will be like that in the world, we have to adapt. It's the only solution. So it seems so. But coming back to the question of Central Europe, it's not that everything is so hopeless, because this reshuffling in the automobile industry creates also chances. For example, Poland is already a very important exporter of ion batteries. It already gives us some competence because, for example, Czech Republic has no such plans, and they don't learn these capabilities, what is highly problematic for Czech Republic. I would say that we have a lot of talents when it comes in computer science industries. I believe that we will produce a lot of software, maybe in cooperation with Americans for the automobile for electromobile vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge chance also because there's interesting thing that we have very great cooperation with Germany when it comes to industrial branches like machine building or car industry, but they don't believe too much in the potential of the region when it comes to innovation. We don't have R&D investments from Germany here, but we have, on the other hand, very strong, important R&D subsidiaries of the leading American corporations like Intel, Microsoft, Google, and they know how to use our programmers to make competitive products. So automobile industry, which is very conservative because for a long time it was in just-in-time mode. So if you had a trusted supplier, you didn't want to change it, not to have problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it was also problematic for newcomers like Central European companies, even if they were very competitive. It could be problematic to be higher in these value chains. Right now, when it comes to when it comes to this market reshuffling, they have also chances to go in very innovative product direction and produce something new and maybe get higher chunk of the value there.
Okay. We're coming to the end, and I was going to ask how much time we have. Is the revolution going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years, 20 years? But from what I saw, Europe needs time to adapt, but maybe you're saying that's not the case. Maybe a complete revolution will actually be beneficial for this region. Or not?
For Europe.
I meant for Central Europe.
Mm-hmm. I would say two dates. That we have two important dates. We have 2035 when the European Union declared it will forbid to sell combustion engine cars in the European Union. So it seems that from this, it seems that if there's no change to this schedule, it will be end of the combustion engine, so it's not much time left, just a little bit more than 10 years. But the change comes even faster because the latest data shows that China in 2 years could become the net car exporter to Europe, which was not the case for the past few decades.
Mm-hmm.
And
And we're talking of all kinds of car here,
yeah,
not just
yeah,
electric.
because of this electric car acceleration, they start very dynamically to export to Europe. I think that when we structured our trade policy, it wasn't invented to be that way, that China even dominate our core industries. There is not much time left, and we need very brave industrial policy decisions. We need much more money for innovations, but it seems that just that what European unions typically does. So a lot of bureaucracy. Also part of the answer why Brexit happened. Yeah.
Well, I would not really want to discuss Brexit in this format.
So bureaucracy and regulations and giving money, distributing money to the largest corporations, it didn't work. It didn't bring success in electromobile sector. So maybe we need something else. We need less bureaucracy, less regulations, but much more money for SMEs. Maybe also Central European SMEs, which have new creative ideas and are not just the large combustion engine brands which have to defend their current core industry.
Okay, so that's the message at the end of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this interview. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all future content.